I sat frozen at my parents' dining table, staring at their serious expressions. "Josiah, your penthouse purchase is making your brother feel like a failure," my mother said firmly. After putting myself through college working 80-hour weeks, landing a six-figure tech job, and finally buying my dream downtown penthouse at 27, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "We think you should sell it to keep the peace," my father added, while my brother Tyler nodded smugly. The room spun as years of sacrifice collapsed into a single, devastating moment. Growing up in Portland, I always sensed the difference in how my parents treated me versus my younger brother Tyler. Our modest ranch-style home in a middle-class neighborhood became the stage for this uneven dynamic. Mom and Dad pushed me relentlessly toward academic excellence and responsibility, while making endless excuses for Tyler's mediocrity and laziness. "Josiah, you got an A- on your math test? What happened to the other points?" my father would ask, his disappointment evident in the furrow of his brow. Meanwhile, Tyler would proudly present his C-, and they'd celebrate that he'd improved from a D the previous time. By high school, the pattern was well established. I maintained a 4.0 GPA while working 20 hours weekly at the local grocery store. Tyler barely passed his classes, spent most afternoons playing video games, and received constant encouragement that he was finding his path. My senior year of high school, I sat at the kitchen table with my college applications spread before me. I'd applied to several state universities, hoping to use the small college fund my parents had started when I was born. "Josiah, we need to talk about something," my mother said one evening, exchanging a look with my father. "The college fund. We had to use it for the house renovations last year." I stared at them. The breath knocked from my lungs. "All of it?" "But that was almost $15,000. "You're smart enough to get scholarships," my father said confidently. "And you're such a hard worker. Tyler needs more time to figure things out. He might need that money more than you do." I received my acceptance letter to Portland State University a month later, along with a partial scholarship that covered about 40% of the tuition. Looking at the remaining costs, I realized I needed to work more than ever before. My schedule became brutal. I woke at 4:30 each morning to prepare for my barista shift at 5. I worked until 9, then rushed to campus for classes from 9:30 to 3:30. After classes, I'd hurry to my restaurant job from 4 to midnight. Weekends were filled with shifts at a retail store. Every spare moment went to studying, or the brief snatches of sleep I could manage. The physical toll was immediate and severe. I lost 15 pounds in the first semester alone. Dark circles became permanent fixtures beneath my eyes. I fell asleep on the bus, during rare breaks, sometimes even standing up while waiting for coffee to brew during my morning shift. I studied everywhere, on bus rides, during 15-minute lunch breaks, after midnight when my roommates were asleep. I kept flashcards in my pocket to review while waiting for orders to come up at the restaurant. Every moment had a purpose. Every minute was accounted for. Then came the day that shattered my understanding of my family completely. I was helping my mother with something on her computer when an email notification appeared. "Payment confirmation, Westside Private University, tuition payment, $15,000. The date was just 3 months after they'd told me my college fund was gone. I clicked on it, hands shaking. The confirmation clearly showed they had paid $15,000 for Tyler's first semester at an expensive private university. The very amount they claimed had been spent on house renovations. I confronted them that evening, trying to keep my voice steady despite the hurricane of emotions. "We had different circumstances by then," my mother explained dismissively. "And Tyler needed the support more. He's not as naturally disciplined as you are." "It's because we believe in you, Josiah," my father added. "We knew you could handle it on your own." I left their house that night with a new determination burning in my chest. I would succeed entirely on my own terms, and I would never forget what I'd learned about my family's true priorities. The following 3 years of college blurred together in an endless cycle of work, study, collapse, repeat. There were moments that stand out in their brutality. Working a double shift at the restaurant with a 103-degree fever because I couldn't afford to miss a day. Falling asleep standing up in the shower after a 36-hour stretch without rest. Studying in the library until 3 in the morning. then sleeping on a bench for 2 hours before my morning shift. Through it all, one friendship became my lifeline. Amanda, a psychology major I met in a required humanities course, saw through my exhausted facade to the struggle beneath. She would bring me coffee during late study sessions, save notes when I inevitably missed classes due to work, and most importantly, she listened without judgment. "You're not just working through college," she told me once. "You're working through family stuff too. The way they treat you versus Tyler. It's not right, Josiah." Amanda was the first person who made me feel seen in my struggle, rather than merely praised for my natural discipline or strong work ethic, while the cost remained invisible. Meanwhile, Tyler dropped out of his expensive private university after just 1 semester. My parents were devastated but immediately supportive. "College isn't for everyone," my mother soothed, as Tyler moved back home. "You tried your best, and that's what matters." I visited for Sunday dinner to find my parents had converted the garage into a creative space for Tyler to find his passion. They spoke about his dropout status, as though it were a brave decision rather than a failure to complete what he'd started. During my junior year, my computer science professor recommended me for a prestigious tech internship at DataSphere, an emerging company in Portland's growing tech scene. The opportunity was incredible but created a painful dilemma. The hours conflicted directly with my restaurant job, which paid the highest hourly rate of all my positions. "You have to take it," Amanda insisted when I explained the situation. "This is your future." "But rent and tuition," I began. Amanda cut me off. "I've got some savings. Not a lot, but enough to help you bridge the gap for a few months. You'd do the same for me." With Amanda's temporary help, and by increasing hours at my other jobs, I took the internship. The experience was transformative. For the first time, I was valued for my mind, rather than just my ability to carry plates or make lattes. I absorbed everything, staying hours after my scheduled time to learn from the senior developers. Despite the added pressure, I maintained my 4.0 GPA and continued working every available hour at my remaining jobs. Sleep became even more scarce, but the internship energized me with purpose. My graduation approached with both excitement and dread. I'd secured a full-time position at DataSphere, starting immediately after graduation, a remarkable achievement that my few friends celebrated enthusiastically. The morning of graduation, I called my parents to confirm they'd be attending the ceremony. "Oh, Josiah," my mother said, sounding distracted, "something's come up. Tyler found an apartment, and today's the only day we can help him move in. You understand, don't you? This is a big step for him." The phone felt heavy in my hand. "Mom, this is my college graduation. I worked 80-hour weeks for 4 years to make this happen, and we're very proud," she said quickly. "But Tyler needs our support right now. He's been struggling with his confidence, and this apartment is the fresh start he needs." Later that day, as I sat among my fellow graduates in my rented cap and gown, the empty seats I'd saved for my family stared back at me like an accusation. Amanda took pictures of me receiving my diploma, then treated me to dinner at a restaurant far nicer than I could afford. It was only months later that I discovered the full truth. Not only had my parents skipped my graduation for Tyler's move, but they were secretly paying for his new apartment, the fresh start he needed while I continued to work multiple jobs to support myself despite my new position at DataSphere. My entry-level position at DataSphere came with a modest but steady salary that allowed me to drop down to just 1 part-time job instead of 3. After years of 80-hour weeks, working only 50 felt like a vacation. I could actually sleep 6 hours some nights, a luxury that made me giddy with its extravagance. The professional environment presented new challenges. I didn't have the right clothes, didn't understand office politics, and lacked the social ease of colleagues who'd grown up with family connections and support. But what I lacked in polish, I made up for in determination and technical skill. "You're a sponge," my manager Brian commented during my first review. "I've never seen anyone absorb information so quickly." What he didn't see was how I stayed late every night, reading documentation and practicing coding challenges until the office emptied and security came through on their rounds. I couldn't afford to fail. There was no safety net, no parents to move back in with if things didn't work out. Meanwhile, Tyler continued his pattern of starts and stops. He worked at a coffee shop for 3 months, then quit because the manager was stifling his creativity. He spent 6 weeks learning guitar, then abandoned it when he didn't progress as quickly as he expected. With each failed venture, my parents offered comfort and financial support. Tyler's exploring. My mother explained when I asked about his apparent lack of direction. Not everyone finds their path as easily as you did. I bit back the response that burned in my throat that my path had been forged through exhaustion and sacrifice, not discovered through comfortable exploration. My dedication at Datasphere began to yield results. I solved a persistent bug that had been causing customer complaints, created a more efficient data processing workflow, and volunteered for projects others avoided. Within 18 months, I received my first promotion to mid-level developer, with a corresponding salary increase. I continued making efforts to maintain my family relationships. I visited for holidays and occasional weekends, brought thoughtful gifts, and listened to lengthy updates about Tyler's latest interests. I never mentioned my promotion or growing savings account, having learned that my successes were viewed as implicit criticisms of my brother. During one such visit, my father took me aside with a serious expression. "Your mother and I have been dealing with some roof issues," he said quietly. "The estimate for repairs is $8,000, and with helping Tyler get his new business idea off the ground, we're stretched thin." I wrote them a check that evening. $8,000, nearly 2 months' worth of my take-home pay, transferred without question or hesitation. My father clasped my shoulder and called me a good son. 3 months later, I drove past a food truck with Tyler's smiling face painted on the side. Tyler's gourmet grilled cheese was emblazoned in bright colors above an elaborate logo. $8,000 worth of equipment gleamed inside the pristine vehicle. When confronted, my parents were unapologetic. "The roof was fixed with our tax return," my mother explained, "and Tyler needed this chance to prove himself. You should be happy for your brother instead of being so selfish." The word selfish struck me like a physical blow. After everything I had given, everything I had sacrificed, being called selfish by the very people who had consistently prioritized my brother's comfort over my basic needs felt like the cruelest irony. I began pulling back from family interactions. I limited visits to major holidays, kept phone calls brief and focused on their lives rather than mine, and stopped offering financial assistance. The distance grew almost imperceptibly at first, then widened into a chasm neither side seemed eager to bridge. At work, however, my trajectory continued upward. By my 26th birthday, I had been promoted twice more. I now led a small team developing key components for Datasphere's flagship product. The responsibility was enormous, but after years of juggling multiple jobs and full-time studies, the pressure felt manageable, almost comfortable. My department was assigned a critical project for our largest client, a financial services company whose requirements were notoriously complex. For 6 weeks, my team worked extended hours, solving problem after problem. The night before the deadline, we discovered a fundamental flaw in our approach that threatened the entire implementation. While others panicked, I felt an odd sense of calm. Compared to working 3 jobs while maintaining perfect grades, this was a straightforward challenge with a technical solution. I sent my team home, brewed a pot of coffee, and settled in for the night. By morning, I had not only fixed the flaw, but had created a more elegant solution than our original plan. When the client representatives arrived for the presentation, they were so impressed they immediately requested that I personally oversee all future development for their company. 2 weeks later, I was called into the office of Janet Winters, the company's director of technology. "The Harrison financial team won't stop talking about you," she said, leaning back in her chair. "You turned what could have been a disaster into a major win for us." She slid a document across her desk. "This is a promotion to senior solutions architect, with the corresponding salary adjustment. You'll be the youngest senior-level employee in company history." I scanned the document, my eyes widening at the salary figure, $120,000 annually. More money than I had imagined making before 30. More than enough to finally consider the luxury of long-term planning rather than day-to-day survival. That weekend, I allowed myself to browse real estate listings for the first time. What had been a distant dream suddenly materialized into possibility. I could buy a home. Not just any home, but something that represented the distance I had traveled from those exhausted college years of multiple jobs and stolen moments of sleep. The Portland real estate market was competitive, but with my new salary and the savings I'd accumulated through years of minimal expenses, I qualified for properties I had previously only walked past with wistful glances. As I scrolled through listings, a downtown penthouse caught my eye. The views of the Willamette River and Mount Hood were breathtaking, the location perfect for my commute, the open concept design exactly what I'd imagined during those late nights studying in cramped quarters. It was audacious, perhaps even a bit reckless, but after years of calculated sacrifice, I wanted something that represented the future rather than compensated for the past. I made an appointment to view the property the next day. 3 weeks, multiple viewings, and one intense negotiation later, I signed the final paperwork. At 27 years old, I owned a downtown penthouse in one of Portland's most desirable locations. The first person I invited to see it was Amanda, who squealed with delight as she explored each room. "This is incredible, Josiah. I'm so proud of you," she said, hugging me tightly. "You earned this, every single square foot." Later that evening, I called my parents to share the news. Their response was tepid at best. "A penthouse? Isn't that a bit extravagant?" my mother asked. "What will you do with all that space? Have you thought about how this might make Tyler feel?" my father added. "He's still trying to find his footing, and hearing about your penthouse might be difficult for him." I ended the call feeling deflated rather than celebrated. The next day, scrolling through social media, I saw dozens of photos from a party at my parents' house, celebrating our rising star. Read the caption under a picture of Tyler standing proudly beside my beaming parents. The celebration, I learned through comments, was for Tyler's new temporary position at a local marketing firm, his first regular job in nearly 2 years. The contrast was stark. My life-changing achievement warranted concern about its effect on Tyler, while his temporary job inspired a family celebration. The realization settled in my stomach like a stone, heavy with implications I had spent years trying to ignore. The weeks following my penthouse purchase were filled with the joyful chaos of moving and decorating. I chose each piece of furniture carefully, creating the home I had imagined during those long nights working multiple jobs. The space became a physical manifestation of my journey, clean lines and purposeful design reflecting the clarity of purpose that had carried me through the hardest years. The corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows became my favorite spot. From there, I could see the city lights spread out below, a constellation of possibilities. Often, I would work late into the evening, still unable to shake the habits of constant productivity, despite the fact that I no longer needed to maintain such a punishing schedule. Amanda visited frequently, bringing housewarming gifts and takeout food when she suspected I hadn't eaten properly. "You need to learn to enjoy this," she said one evening, gesturing around the spacious living room. "You've been running on survival mode for so long, I think you've forgotten how to relax." She was right. Even in my beautiful new home, I caught myself living as though at any moment it might all disappear, saving leftovers others would discard, turning off lights in empty rooms with almost compulsive regularity, hesitating before small purchases that were now well within my means. My work continued to thrive. The promotion had brought new responsibilities and challenges that engaged my mind fully. I was building a reputation as someone who could solve the most intractable problems, the go-to person when a project seemed impossible. 2 weeks after moving in, I received a call from my father on a Sunday afternoon. "We need to have a family meeting," he said, his tone unusually serious. "Can you come over for dinner tomorrow night?" "Is everything okay?" I asked, immediately concerned. "Is someone sick?" "Everyone's fine," he assured me. "We just need to discuss some important family matters. Your mother's making your favorite lasagna." The mention of my favorite meal sparked a tentative hope. Perhaps this was their way of finally acknowledging my achievements. Maybe they'd realized how they'd minimized my penthouse purchase and wanted to make amends. After all, lasagna had always been reserved for special celebrations in our family. I arrived at my parents' house the following evening with a good bottle of wine and cautious optimism. The familiar ranch-style home looked exactly as it had throughout my childhood, the wear of decades visible in the faded paint and settling foundation. My mother greeted me with a distracted hug, immediately turning back to the kitchen. My father ushered me into the dining room where Tyler already sat. An expression on his face I couldn't quite interpret, something between smugness and vindication that immediately set off warning signals in my mind. Dinner began with uncomfortable small talk. My mother asked cursory questions about my job without waiting for complete answers. My father commented on sports teams I had never followed. Tyler remained unusually quiet, watching me with that same unsettling expression. Finally, as my mother served coffee and the pie I knew she had made for Tyler rather than me, my father cleared his throat. "Josiah, we wanted to talk to you about your recent purchase." "The penthouse?" I asked, though I knew precisely what he meant. "Yes," my mother interjected. "We're concerned about the message it's sending to the family." I set my coffee cup down carefully. "What message?" My father exchanged glances with my mother before continuing. "Your success is wonderful, of course, but the way you're flaunting it is causing problems." "Flaunting it?" I repeated, genuinely confused. "I bought a home. I haven't flaunted anything. I haven't even posted pictures online." "Tyler is very upset," my mother said, reaching over to pat my brother's hand, "seeing you with this expensive penthouse when he's still trying to find his way. It's creating a division in the family." Tyler finally spoke, his voice quavering with what seemed like rehearsed emotion. "It feels like you're deliberately trying to show me up, Josiah. Like you're trying to prove you're better than me." I stared at him in disbelief. "Tyler, I worked 80-hour weeks through college. I've been at the same company for 5 years, working my way up. How is my buying a home with money I earned showing you up?" "That's exactly the attitude we're talking about," my father said sternly. "You've had advantages Tyler didn't have." The irony of this statement momentarily robbed me of speech. When I found my voice again, it emerged low and controlled. "What advantages exactly? The college fund that went to house renovations? The tuition you paid for Tyler but not for me? The apartment you secretly funded for him while I worked 3 jobs to pay rent? That's ancient history," my mother dismissed with a wave of her hand. "We're talking about now, about family harmony. We think it would be best if you sold the penthouse," my father stated flatly. "It's causing too much tension. Tyler can't even come visit you there without feeling inadequate." "Sell my home?" I repeated, certain I had misheard. "It would be the selfless thing to do," my mother added, "for family peace." I looked around at their faces, my father's stern certainty, my mother's manipulative concern, Tyler's poorly concealed satisfaction. Years of uneven treatment crystallized in that moment into a pattern too clear to ignore or excuse. "Let me be sure I understand," I said carefully. "I put myself through college working multiple jobs because you spent my college fund. I built my career through hard work, while you supported Tyler through repeated failures. I bought a home with my own money, and now you want me to sell it because Tyler feels bad that he hasn't achieved the same success? You're twisting things," my father accused. "This is about family unity." "No," I responded, standing up slowly. "This is about continuing the pattern that's existed my entire life. Tyler is comfortable being coddled, and you're comfortable coddling him. My success challenges that arrangement." "How dare you speak to us that way?" my mother exclaimed. "After everything we've done for you." The question of what, exactly, they had done for me hung in the air, unanswered and damning in its emptiness. I left their house that night with my mind spinning and my heart pounding. The drive back to my penthouse passed in a blur of conflicting emotions. For the first time, I had spoken the truth about our family dynamic openly, and the reaction had been exactly what I might have expected: denial, deflection, and blame. 3 days later, a family friend named Susan called me unexpectedly. We had always been friendly but weren't particularly close, making her call surprising. "Josiah, I hope you don't mind me reaching out," she began hesitantly. "I ran into your parents at the grocery store yesterday, and something's been bothering me about our conversation." "What did they say?" I asked, already anticipating the answer. Susan sighed. "They were talking about your new job and home, telling everyone it was just luck and connections that got you where you are. They made it sound like you'd had everything handed to you, while poor Tyler was nobly working through challenges. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Not only were my parents diminishing my achievements privately, but they were actively rewriting the narrative publicly, casting Tyler as the underdog hero and me as the undeserving recipient of good fortune. "Thank you for telling me," I said quietly. "They've always done this, you know," Susan added. "Even when you were in high school, winning academic awards while working part-time, they'd somehow turn conversations to Tyler's creative spirit or sensitive nature. I've never understood it." After ending the call, I stood at my penthouse windows looking out at the city lights, feeling more alone than I had during the most grueling days of working multiple jobs through college. The truth I had been avoiding for years now stood stark and undeniable. My family's love and approval had always been conditional in a way that set me up for perpetual failure. In the days following the disastrous family dinner, I retreated into the private sanctuary of my penthouse. The space that had represented triumph now felt tainted by my family's rejection. I moved through my daily routines, mechanically: work, home, sleep, repeat, while wrestling with questions that had no comfortable answers. Had I been wrong to push so hard for success? Was I genuinely being selfish by refusing to diminish myself to protect Tyler's fragile ego? What obligation did I have to a family that had consistently prioritized his comfort over my basic needs? I canceled social plans, declined dinner invitations from colleagues, and let my phone go to voicemail. The penthouse, with its expansive views and careful design, began to feel less like a home and more like an expensive hiding place. In my darkest moments, I even considered giving in, selling the penthouse, moving somewhere more modest, removing the visible evidence of my success to keep the fragile peace in my family. The thought brought immediate shame, yet I couldn't entirely dismiss it. The longing for family acceptance ran deep, despite years of evidence that it might never be freely given. After a week of isolation, Amanda showed up at my door with groceries and concern etched on her face. "You haven't returned my calls," she said, pushing past me into the kitchen. "And based on how awful you look, I'm guessing you haven't been eating properly either." She was right. I had lost weight, and the dark circles under my eyes rivaled those from my most exhausting college days. As she unpacked fresh vegetables and began chopping with efficient movements, I found myself telling her about the family meeting and its aftermath. Amanda listened without interruption, her expression growing increasingly troubled. "Josiah," she said finally, setting down her knife, "this isn't normal. What they're asking is not reasonable, and how they've treated you for years is not okay." "They're still my family," I said weakly. "Yes, and families should support each other's successes, not punish them." She took my hands in hers. "I think you should talk to someone professional about this. This pattern goes back too far and cuts too deep for you to sort through alone." The suggestion of therapy initially felt like an overreaction. My rational mind recognized the dysfunction in my family, but some deeper part of me still resisted labeling it as something requiring professional intervention. Nevertheless, the following day I reached out to Dr. Peterson, a therapist recommended by a colleague who had navigated his own family difficulties. The first session was tentative, filled with surface-level descriptions of recent events. By the third session, we had begun excavating deeper patterns that stretched back to my earliest memories. "What you're describing has elements of scapegoating and golden child dynamics," Dr. Peterson explained during our fourth session. "In family systems like yours, one child often becomes the repository for the family's expectations and criticisms, while another becomes the focus of protection and unconditional support." The terminology gave shape to experiences I had felt but never named. I began reading about family dynamics, recognizing patterns with such clarity that it sometimes took my breath away. Pages of clinical descriptions felt like they had been written specifically about my family. During this period of painful self-discovery, I also reconnected with Dr. Winters, my former professor who had become a mentor during my college years. "I always wondered about your family situation," he admitted over coffee. "You were working yourself to exhaustion while maintaining perfect grades, yet your parents never attended department events or your graduation. It struck me as unusual." His outside perspective helped validate my experience. Dr. Winters had observed from a distance what I had been too close to see clearly, a fundamental imbalance in how I was valued within my family system. As I gradually emerged from my isolation, I began rebuilding my life with new boundaries and awareness. I returned to work with renewed focus, set regular dinner dates with Amanda and other friends, and even joined a rock-climbing gym, something I'd always wanted to try, but had never allowed myself the time or expense to pursue. 2 weeks into this fragile new equilibrium, I received a text message from Tyler that was clearly meant for our parents. "Don't worry, I'm working on Josiah. Once I move in with him temporarily, it won't be long before I'm established there. His place has plenty of room, and you know he can't say no to family. Problem solved." The message confirmed what I had begun to suspect. The pressure to sell my penthouse wasn't just about Tyler's feelings. It was part of a larger plan to insert him into my success. The temporary arrangement would inevitably become permanent, with my brother comfortably installed in the home I had worked so hard to earn. I forwarded the misdirected text to my parents with a single question. Was this the plan all along? My mother called immediately, her voice a mixture of defensiveness and placation. "We were going to discuss it with you properly," she insisted. "Tyler is going through a rough patch, and he needs a fresh start. Your penthouse has 3 bedrooms. You don't need all that space for just yourself. So instead of asking me directly if my brother could stay with me, you tried to manipulate me into selling my home? You're being dramatic," she replied. "We're just trying to find solutions that work for everyone in the family." "Everyone except me," I said quietly, and ended the call. That night, sitting in my corner office surrounded by the city lights, I made a decision. This pattern would not continue. I would not diminish myself to accommodate Tyler's stagnation or my parents' enabling. Whatever form our relationship took moving forward, it would be based on honesty and reciprocal respect, not manipulation and uneven expectations. With clarity born of pain and professional guidance, I began planning my response, not a reactive outburst, but a carefully considered confrontation that would either reset our family dynamic or release me from its destructive patterns. After extensive consultation with Dr. Peterson, I decided to initiate my own family meeting. This time, however, the terms would be mine. I sent a group text to my parents and Tyler, requesting their presence at my penthouse the following Sunday afternoon. I specified that Amanda would also be present, partly for emotional support and partly as a neutral witness to whatever transpired. The week leading up to the meeting was surprisingly calm. Having made the decision to address the dysfunction directly, I felt a weight lifting regardless of the outcome. I would no longer be complicit in maintaining unhealthy patterns through silence. I prepared methodically, gathering concrete examples of the pattern that had defined our family dynamics. Bank statements showing my support of family expenses while receiving none myself. Text messages revealing the stark difference in how my achievements versus Tyler's were acknowledged. A timeline of critical moments when support had been promised but withdrawn, often diverted to Tyler instead. Sunday arrived with crisp autumn sunshine streaming through my penthouse windows. Amanda came early, helping arrange the living room for our meeting and providing last-minute reassurance. "Remember," she said, straightening a couch pillow, "you're not asking for their approval. You're establishing boundaries and speaking your truth. Whatever happens next is their choice." My family arrived punctually, their expressions a mixture of curiosity about seeing my home for the first time and wariness about the purpose of the meeting. My mother immediately began commenting on the decor, subtle criticisms disguised as observations. Tyler wandered through the space with poorly concealed envy, while my father remained stiffly formal, as though in a stranger's home rather than his son's. Once everyone was seated, I took a deep breath and began. "Thank you all for coming. I've asked you here because we need to address some long-standing issues in our family. For as long as I can remember, there's been an unbalanced dynamic between how Tyler and I are treated, supported, and valued." My father immediately tried to interrupt, but I held up a hand. "Please let me finish. I've listened to all of you for years. Today I'm asking for the same courtesy." I proceeded to lay out specific examples: the college fund that disappeared for me, but materialized for Tyler, The multiple instances where my academic and professional achievements were minimized while Tyler's modest efforts were celebrated, the recent attempt to pressure me into selling my home while planning to install Tyler in it. This isn't about comparing accomplishments, I clarified. It's about recognizing a harmful pattern. I've spent years trying to earn approval that's freely given to Tyler. I've contributed financially to this family while receiving criticism for my success. And I've remained silent about the hurt this has caused until now. My mother was the first to respond, her voice tight with indignation. You've always been so capable, Josiah. Tyler needed more support. We were just trying to balance things out. But that's exactly the problem, I countered. You created an imbalance and called it balance. You held me to impossible standards while expecting almost nothing from Tyler. The result is that I nearly destroyed my health working through college while Tyler dropped out of a school you paid for, and now you want me to sell my home because he feels inadequate. Tyler's face flushed with anger. This is exactly what I was talking about. You think you're better than me. No, Tyler, I said calmly. I don't think I'm better than you. I think I've worked harder than you because I had to. You've had safety nets and support systems I never received. So what are you saying? My father demanded. That we're bad parents? That we should have left Tyler to struggle like you did? I'm saying that constantly rescuing Tyler while expecting me to solve my own problems created this situation. I'm saying that diminishing my achievements while celebrating his minimal efforts sent a clear message about whose success actually mattered to you. And I'm saying that this pattern stops now. I outlined my boundaries clearly. No more financial support for the family until Tyler demonstrated genuine effort toward independence. No more diminishing my accomplishments to protect his ego. No more manipulations disguised as concern for family harmony. If you want a relationship with me moving forward, I concluded, it needs to be based on mutual respect and recognition of these patterns. I'm not willing to continue being the family scapegoat while Tyler remains the golden child. The terms scapegoat and golden child triggered an explosion of denial from my parents. My father accused me of reading too much psychology nonsense, while my mother tearfully claimed I was tearing the family apart with selfish demands. Tyler stormed out of the penthouse, slamming the door behind him. My parents followed shortly after, my mother's parting shot hanging in the air. When you're ready to apologize and act like part of this family again, you know where to find us. The silence after their departure felt both desolate and liberating. Amanda wrapped an arm around my shoulders as I stared out at the city skyline. That was incredibly brave, she said quietly. And for what it's worth, everything you said was true. The following weeks brought various attempts at manipulation from my family. My mother sent guilt-inducing texts about breaking her heart. My father called with stern lectures about family loyalty. Tyler alternated between angry messages and pitiful ones, depending on which he thought might be more effective. I maintained my boundaries calmly, but firmly. Each attempt at manipulation merely confirmed the patterns I had named, providing additional clarity rather than creating doubt. After approximately a month of failed attempts to pull me back into old patterns, a curious shift occurred. The messages from my parents became less frequent and less demanding. Tyler, facing the reality that neither I nor our parents were going to solve his problems, began taking tentative steps toward actual independence. I learned through mutual acquaintances that he had applied for several full-time positions and had begun community college classes in the evening's modest steps, but significant given his history of abandoned efforts. My parents, finding their attempts at manipulation ineffective, apparently sought perspective from friends, including Susan, who had long observed our family dynamic. Susan later told me she had been bluntly honest with them about what she had witnessed over the years. I think they're genuinely reflecting, she said during a coffee meeting. It's uncomfortable for them to face, but the evidence was too consistent to ignore once they actually looked at it. 6 weeks after our confrontation, I received an unexpected email from my father. The tone was different from anything I had received from him before, humble, reflective, lacking the usual undercurrent of judgment and expectation. Josiah, he wrote, your mother and I have been doing a lot of thinking about what you said. We've also talked with some friends who have known our family for years. The perspective we've gained has been difficult but necessary. We realize now that there were patterns we didn't see or didn't want to see. If you're willing, we'd like to meet with a family counselor together to work through these issues properly. No expectations, no manipulations, just an honest attempt to understand and heal. I approached the invitation with cautious optimism, discussing it thoroughly with Dr. Peterson before agreeing. We scheduled our first family counseling session with Dr. Larson, a specialist in family systems therapy, for the following week. The first family counseling session with Dr. Larson was uncomfortable for everyone. My parents arrived with visible tension in their postures, Tyler with defensive hostility barely contained beneath a veneer of cooperation. I had prepared myself for various scenarios, including the possibility that this was simply another tactic to bring me back in line without genuine change. Dr. Larson established ground rules immediately. No interrupting, no dismissing others' experiences, no ultimatums. Each person would have uninterrupted time to express their perspective, beginning with me since I had initiated the process. I spoke honestly about my experiences growing up as the family scapegoat held to impossible standards, while watching Tyler receive support and praise for minimal effort. I described the physical toll of working multiple jobs through college, after being told my education was my responsibility alone, while Tyler received tuition payments and housing assistance. I explained the emotional impact of having my achievements consistently minimized while Tyler's smallest steps were celebrated. When I finished, there was a heavy silence in the room. Dr. Larson thanked me for my honesty and turned to my parents. My mother spoke next, her voice initially defensive, but gradually softening as she worked through her prepared thoughts. "I've always seen myself as a good mother," she began. "I thought I was responding to each of my children's needs appropriately. Josiah seemed so capable, so independent from an early age. Tyler struggled more, needed more guidance and support." She paused, visibly wrestling with difficult emotions, but after talking with friends and reflecting on specific incidents Josiah mentioned, "I can see now that what started as responding to different needs became an unfair dynamic. We expected everything from Josiah, and very little from Tyler. We praised Tyler for small efforts while taking Josiah's major accomplishments for granted." My father nodded slowly as she spoke. When his turn came, he was more direct. "I was raised to believe that children need to be pushed to succeed," he said. "My father was hard on me, and I believed that's what made me disciplined and responsible. I applied that approach to Josiah because he seemed strong enough to handle it. With Tyler, I saw my brother who struggled with constant criticism, so I tried to be gentler." He looked at me directly for the first time. What I didn't consider was how it would feel for Josiah to see that difference in treatment, or how unfair it was to hold him to standards we didn't apply to Tyler. Tyler's turn revealed a perspective I hadn't fully considered. Behind his defensive facade and apparent smugness lay profound insecurity. Everyone always talked about how smart Josiah was, how disciplined, how responsible, he said, staring at the floor. I felt like I could never measure up, so eventually I stopped trying. It was easier to be the creative one, the sensitive one. At least then the comparison wasn't direct. He glanced up briefly. When Josiah bought the penthouse, it felt like final proof that I was the family failure. Asking him to sell it wasn't right, but I was desperate to not feel so. Worthless, by comparison. Dr. Larson guided us through these revelations with skilled questions and observations. She identified how each family member had been trapped in patterns that ultimately served none of us well. My parents' differential treatment had created Tyler's dependency and my exhausting self-reliance. Tyler and I had each adapted to our assigned roles, reinforcing the very dynamic that harmed us both. That first session ended with homework. My parents were to reflect on specific instances where they had applied different standards to Tyler and me. Tyler was to identify steps toward genuine independence he could take without parental rescue. I was to consider what a healthy relationship with my family might look like, separate from the pattern of achievement and recognition-seeking that had driven me for so long. The weeks that followed brought gradual, tentative change. We continued meeting with Dr. Larson bi-weekly, each session building on insights from the last. My parents began acknowledging the unfairness of past decisions rather than justifying them. Tyler started taking concrete steps toward independence, enrolling in community college classes with a realistic plan to transfer to a 4-year program, getting a steady job at a local tech support center, and moving to a more affordable apartment without parental subsidies. Most significantly for me, I began receiving genuine acknowledgement of my achievements from my parents, without the usual qualifiers about how it might affect Tyler. My mother called specifically to congratulate me when my team at DataSphere won an industry award. My father asked thoughtful questions about my work during family dinners, showing interest without competitive comparison to Tyler. 3 months into our counseling process, Tyler called me on a Tuesday evening. "I know things are still weird between us," he said awkwardly, "but I could use some advice about my database class if you have time." It was the first time he had ever approached me as a resource rather than a rival. We met for coffee that weekend, and I helped him work through the concepts he was struggling with. The conversation was slightly strained but fundamentally different from our previous interactions. He was genuinely trying to learn, not seeking a shortcut or handout. By the 6-month mark, our family dynamic had shifted significantly. My parents still occasionally slipped into old patterns, but caught themselves more quickly and made conscious corrections. Tyler was making steady progress in his classes and job, experiencing the genuine satisfaction of earned achievement perhaps for the first time. As for me, the penthouse no longer felt tainted by family discord. It had reclaimed its original meaning as a symbol of my journey and hard-won success. I had even hosted a family dinner there, something I couldn't have imagined 6 months earlier. One evening, as we finished a productive session with Dr. Larson, my father asked if he could speak with me privately afterward. We walked to a nearby park, the autumn leaves crunching beneath our feet. "I want to apologize specifically for something," he said as we sat on a bench overlooking a small pond. "When you were working all those jobs in college, I was actually proud of you. But instead of telling you that, I used your strength as an excuse to direct resources to Tyler." He looked at his hands, weathered by decades of work. "I told myself it was because you didn't need help. The truth is, I admired your determination so much that I couldn't admit we had failed you by not providing what we provided for Tyler." "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because I want you to know that your penthouse, your job, everything you've built, it wasn't just luck and connections as we once claimed. It was earned through sacrifices we should never have required of you. And I'm genuinely proud of the man you've become, not despite our failures, but because you overcame them." The words I had longed to hear for decades washed over me with unexpected healing power. Not because I still needed his approval, but because they represented a truth finally acknowledged. A year after that fateful family meeting in my parents' dining room, where they had demanded I sell my penthouse to protect Tyler's feelings, our family had transformed in ways I had never imagined possible. My relationship with my parents had evolved into one of mutual respect between adults. Tyler and I were developing a genuine brotherhood based on common interests and mutual support rather than competition and resentment. Most importantly, I had found peace with my journey. The years of 80-hour work weeks, the physical exhaustion, the struggle for recognition, all had contributed to the person I had become. I no longer viewed my achievements as weapons in a family competition or as proof of worthiness, but as the natural results of my choices and efforts. My penthouse, once a source of family conflict, had become a gathering place for genuine celebration. The previous weekend, we had hosted a small party for Tyler's completion of his first year of community college with excellent grades. He had done the work himself, without rescuing or enabling, and the pride on his face was entirely different from the defensive smugness of the past. As I stood at my penthouse windows that evening after everyone had gone, watching the city lights mirror the stars above, I reflected on the most important lesson of this difficult journey. True success isn't measured by penthouse views or salary figures, but by the courage to speak your truth, establish healthy boundaries, and create authentic relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation or competition. I had put myself through college working 80-hour weeks. I had landed a 6-figure role at a top tech firm. I had bought a downtown penthouse at 27. But my greatest achievement was breaking the dysfunctional patterns that had threatened to define my family relationships forever. The peaceful confidence that comes from standing firmly in your truth, that's the most valuable penthouse view of all. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself against family pressure or expectations? Comment below with your experience. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share to help others who might be going through similar family dynamics. Thank you for listening, and I wish you the courage to honor your journey, whatever path it takes.